When I was 22, I spent a lot of time alone at my parents' house. They lived in a quiet, upscale neighborhood on the edge of a small town. Our property was expansive, with a large pond directly in the backyard. On the other side of the pond was a quaint town park, and the neighbors were spaced out enough that you couldn't see their houses unless you really looked. It was peaceful, serene, and the kind of place where nothing ever happened until it did. I was home alone that summer, as my parents were traveling, and my older brother, Ethan, was away at college. I had just finished my junior year and was enjoying the freedom of being back in my childhood home. The house felt different when it was empty, though bigger, quieter, almost like it was holding its breath. My favorite room in the house was the sunroom at the back. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the pond, and in the summer, with all the windows open, the breeze was perfect. I spent most of my evenings there, curled up on the corner of the couch, watching TV or reading. That's where I was that night. It was late, probably around 11 p.m. The sun had set hours ago, and the only light came from the flickering TV screen. I was halfway through an episode of some crime drama when I heard it, a loud splash from outside. At first, I thought it was just a goose or a duck. We had plenty of them around the pond, and they often made noise, especially when they were fighting over food. But this was different. The splashes were heavier, more deliberate, like someone was in the water. I muted the TV and leaned closer to the window, straining to hear. The splashing continued, rhythmic and steady. Then, faintly, I heard humming, a low, tuneless sound that sent a chill down my spine. Someone was out there, swimming, in our pond. I stood up and walked to the sunroom door, hesitating for a moment before stepping outside onto the deck. The backyard was pitch black, the kind of darkness that feels almost tangible. I couldn't see the pond, but I could hear the splashes and the humming more clearly now. It was definitely a man. My heart started to race. Each house on the pond owned a specific section of it, and this person was trespassing. I thought about calling out, but something stopped me. Instead, I went back inside and flicked on the deck lights. The sudden brightness illuminated a small portion of the pond, and the splashing stopped. The humming stopped. Whoever was out there had seen me. I locked the door and texted Ethan. Someone swimming in the pond. Creepy as hell. He didn't respond right away, so I tried to shake it off and went back to watching TV. But I couldn't focus. My eyes kept darting to the window, searching the darkness for movement. Then I heard it, a soft thud on the deck. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed the remote and turned off the TV, plunging the room into silence. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard it again, heavy breathing, right outside the window. I dropped to the floor, pressing myself flat against the couch. My mind raced. Should I say something? Should I stay quiet? Before I could decide, a deep voice broke the silence. I see you. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I didn't know what to do, so I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. Mark? Is that you? Mark was one of our neighbors, a guy in his 40s who sometimes came over to chat with my dad. I was praying it was him, that this was some kind of sick joke, but there was no response. Just the sound of footsteps walking away, bare feet slapping against a wooden deck. I stayed on the floor for what felt like an eternity, too scared to move. When I finally worked up the courage, I ran to check the doors. Everything was locked. I texted my family again, and this time my dad called me. Turn on the backyard lights and check if anyone's still out there, he said. Be careful, but don't let some creep scare you in your own home. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and went back to the sunroom. The deck was empty, but when I looked down, I saw wet footprints, barefoot footprints. They led around the side of the deck, and as I followed them, my stomach dropped. There, peering over the edge of the deck, was a man. Just his eyes and forehead were visible, like he'd been waiting for me. We locked eyes for a split second before he turned and disappeared into the darkness. I called 911 immediately. The police arrived quickly, but by then, the man was gone. They searched the property but found nothing. No one had seen anything unusual. No one had heard anything. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. I didn't sleep that night. I shut every window, locked every door, and turned on every light in the house. The next morning, I was relieved to see the sunlight streaming through the windows. I told myself it was over, that the man wouldn't come back. But a week later, something else happened. I have a dog, a golden retriever named Max. We go on 3 walks a day, morning, afternoon, and night. Our usual route takes us through the driveway, past the cul-de-sac, and into the parking lot of the condominium complex next door. It's a quiet area, especially at night, and I've never had any issues until that night. It was around 10 p.m., and I had one AirPod in, listening to music as Max sniffed around the bushes. The parking lot was dark, as usual, with no streetlights to illuminate the area. I was halfway through the lot when I heard it. A voice. It was faint, muffled, like it was coming from far away. I paused, took out my AirPod, and listened. Help. The word was clear, but the voice was strange. It sounded like a child, but there was something off about it, almost like it was a recording. I looked around, but the parking lot was empty. Max didn't seem to notice anything. He was too busy sniffing a patch of grass. Help. It came again, this time from my left. I swung my flashlight in that direction, but there was no one there, just a row of parked cars. My heart was pounding now. I took a few steps forward, my flashlight darting around the lot. Help. The voice was closer this time, and I realized it was coming from one of the cars. I froze, my mind racing. Was someone trapped in there? Hurt? I didn't know what to do. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That I heard a voice coming from a car, but couldn't see anyone? Max's ears perked up, and he started growling softly. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining it. Something was wrong. I grabbed his leash and ran back to the house, my heart pounding the entire way. When I got home, I told my mom what had happened. She was just as confused as I was. We decided not to call the police, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister had happened in that parking lot. To this day, I still don't know what or who I heard that night. When I was a kid, I struggled with depression. I spent a lot of time alone in my room, which was in the back corner of the house. It was a big room with windows on 2 walls that faced the woods. At night, it was terrifying. The darkness outside felt like it was pressing against the glass, and I was always scared something was watching me. Things started happening when I was around 10. It was small things at first. My night light would change colors on its own, or would be unplugged when I woke up in the morning. My parents dismissed it as the night light being glitchy, but I knew something was wrong. Then, one night, I woke up to the sound of rustling in my closet. I told my parents, but they didn't believe me. My dad even checked the closet and found nothing. But a few nights later, he discovered something that changed everything. There was a hole in the wall behind one of my posters. A big hole, big enough for someone to crawl through. My dad followed it outside and found a tunnel that led from the woods straight into my room. Someone had been coming into my room at night, and I had no idea how long it had been going on. We moved out of that house shortly after. To this day, I still don't know who or what was coming into my room, but I'll never forget the feeling of being watched, of knowing that something was in there with me. A few months ago, I started noticing a black van parked in my neighbor's driveway. It was unusual because he usually drove a navy blue BMW. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I started seeing him carry a long black bag to and from the van. It looked heavy, like it was full of something or someone. One night, I decided to follow him. He drove to an abandoned gas station in the woods, and when I broke in to investigate, I triggered an alarm. The next morning, the police arrested him. They wouldn't tell me what he'd done, but I have my suspicions. Last year, I started having nightmares about a demonic creature. At first, I thought they were just dreams, but then I woke up with a gash on my thigh, a gash that matched the one the creature had given me in my dream. When my roommate and I investigated, we found someone hiding under my bed. They'd been living in our apartment for who knows how long, watching us, waiting. These experiences have changed me. They've made me more cautious, more aware of the darkness that can hide in the most ordinary places. And while I don't have all the answers, I know one thing for sure. The world is a lot stranger and a lot scarier than we like to think.